Hello again, and welcome to your third sample question dealing with Canadian citizenship. So we saw in question number one, we took a look at a scenario where someone was born in Canada, and we wanted to acknowledge whether or not this person is a Canadian citizen. Well, we took a look at question number two, which dealt with the residency requirements and, of course, a person's status in Canada, and how all that, of course, relates to whether or not a person can obtain Canadian citizenship and when they can obtain Canadian citizenship. Well, number three is going to be a little bit trickier, and it deals with somebody who is born into a Canadian family but born overseas. So this is going to be a great question for us to answer and a good way to see this topic in the context of a question that you might face in the real exam, of course. All right, so here is your question. It's a bit longer, but I'll give you the 2 minutes here to read through it. All right, so our 2 minutes is up, and I'll read it to you like I usually do, just in case you're listening to this. All right, Miroslav has booked a consultation with RCIC Ronaldo to explore bringing his family to live in Canada. Miroslav explains that he is 34, has a BA in history, speaks English at a CLB9 level, and has been working as a high school teacher for 8 years. The reason that he would like to move to Canada is because his grandfather was born in Toronto, and he used to tell him stories about growing up in Ontario. He says that his grandmother moved to Germany when he was a teenager, married his grandmother, and his father was born in Berlin in 1948. Miroslav goes on to explain that when his father passed away 10 years ago, a friend said that his father is probably automatically a Canadian citizen. However, his father never applied for proof of citizenship. However, Miroslav wants to know if this means that he is a Canadian citizen himself. What should RCIC Ronaldo advise? Then we have A through D. Miroslav is automatically a Canadian citizen because his father was also a Canadian citizen. Miroslav and his children are automatically Canadian citizens because of the fourth generation rule. Miroslav is not a Canadian citizen and has to apply under a permanent resident program. And D, Miroslav is not a Canadian citizen and does not likely qualify for any permanent resident programs. All right, so pretty tricky because with this one, we need to really look at the father and see if this has an effect on Miroslav becoming a Canadian citizen. So with this one, we can analyze A and B together because they're based really on the same point. So we have a lot of information about this. So his grandfather, Miroslav's grandfather, was born in Toronto, Miroslav's father was born in Berlin. A friend said his father was probably a Canadian citizen. This doesn't matter, really. So you're going to have these, they call them red herrings, and distractors, really, in scenarios. I wouldn't really look at this one too deeply. And it's interesting because you get this with clients too, where they say, oh, my cousin's friend's neighbor said this, and it's often totally wrong. And it's those are elements you have to navigate, really, in your job. And of course, in getting your job as an RCIC, you have to pass the exam, and you see these elements in the exam as well, because it's what you face in real life too. All right, his father never applied for proof of citizenship. Now, when we take a look at this at the first generation limit, so I think automatically you know that B is incorrect because the fourth generation rule just doesn't exist. And for B as well, we're taking a look to see if his father's status or non-status as a Canadian affects Miroslav here. So we could see that Miroslav's father, as we can see, he never applied for proof of citizenship and didn't register the baby's birth, of course. So we can see over here that that would definitely mean that that Miroslav is not a Canadian citizen, and his father was not a Canadian citizen either. He never applied for it or anything like that. So we can see that it's a little bit tricky in there. But those are the elements that lead us towards knowing that A is incorrect. And now we're left with C and D. So C and D take a look in a different direction. So remember that a lot of the elements of immigration overlap with each other. So it's not that common to have a question dealing only with the Federal Skilled Worker Program or dealing only with citizenship. Often the elements overlap with each other, just like in real life. So let's analyze C and D. So with C and D, really we're looking at deepening our thought here that Miroslav is not a Canadian citizen, so we already proved that. So we know that C and D are what we're choosing between. And then we have some information about Miroslav. So he's 34, BA in history, speaks English at CLB 9 level, and has been working as a high school teacher for 8 years. So remember, your job as an RCIC is to always look at this information, look at the person, look at their intent, as we can see over here, and of course a ton of other information. And there are so many immigration programs in Canada, so what you do is you see if a person can match up with one of those programs. Now in this case, we can see that he pretty easily meets the requirements of the Federal Skilled Worker Program. And if you want to go take a look at all the little PNPs, he probably qualifies for 1 or 2 of those as well. But remember, you have 1 minute 48 to answer this question. So you don't want to dig too deeply into those PNPs. Instead, with the Federal Skilled Worker Program, well, we can see that he meets it. If you want to add up the points, you can stop the video now and add them up. And if you want me just to tell you the points that he has under the Federal Skilled Worker Program, I'll just tell you. It's 68. So, but generally speaking, if somebody has this profile, they're in a pretty good position under the Federal Skilled Worker Program, of course. Does this mean he'll be selected in express entry? We don't really know. But do we know that he qualifies under a permanent resident program? Well, yeah, we know he does. And that leads us towards C as being the correct answer. And that was our last question in the citizenship lesson series that we've produced here. So for all of you, I hope that you enjoyed the lessons. And if you're going to, well, you're going to obviously pass the full skills exam and become immigration consultants. But remember that you are also citizenship consultants. So this really helps. And once you have clients and you help them to immigrate to Canada, and then a few years later, you help them to obtain their Canadian citizenship, well, they are going to be so happy with your services. And for you as well, you're changing people's lives. So keep up the good work. You're just about there. And of course, once you become RCICs, well, we have a whole lot of support there for you as well. All right, so have a good day. Keep up the good studies, and I'll see you at the next lesson.